to Christ Church Southport. My name is Tabs, here to introduce you to the second episode of this current series of CCS Online. You watching this today, then a big welcome to you. We are a Church of England congregation at the heart of Southport, with a heart for Southport. We join together in loads of different ways to build community, each growing, seeking the power of God to bring hope in relevant ways to today's society, putting Jesus at the centre, seeing lives changed. So, in a sec, I want to invite you to set aside this time to simply be still and to ready your heart and mind to step further into God's presence today, giving him praise with a psalm and praying that you would find the faith and hope to hear him speak to you today as we carry on this series. Then we'll head over live to hear this week's message from our Sunday morning in-person gathering, have some music, and before we go, here's some ways you can continue to connect with CCS. But before all that, here's a little bit more of who we are.
Be This morning's Bible reading is taken from John chapter 1, verses 35 to 42. It can be found on page number 1064 of the Church Bible and followed on the screen. The next day, John was there again with two of his disciples. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the two disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying, and they spent that day with him. It was about 4 p.m. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah," that is, the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which, when translated, is Peter. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Switched on this morning. Good morning all, how are we? Great. Please don't roll off. Great. Welcome to Christ Church. My name's Ben. For those of you who are here for your first time, I'm the vicar here, and we are speaking about the second part of our vision today. I'm really excited about that. Now, one warning, this is a long talk. Long in a good way, don't worry. But if you need a toilet break during it, you're very welcome to. If you fall asleep during it, I'm not going to take offence. If you need some snacks, hopefully you've brought them already. If you haven't brought snacks, but you're welcome to eat snacks during the talk. I mean, we'll probably be done about 6 o'clock tonight, so hopefully you haven't got any plans this afternoon. I'm joking, we're not going to be done at 6 tonight. Let me pray before I speak. Father God, I want to thank you that you've brought us to a place where we can talk about vision, we can talk about our future and where you might be leading us. And I pray that this morning, as we talk more about this vision, I pray that you would fill us all with a sense that this is from you, and we would all have a sense of excitement about where you wanted to take us. Amen. So in the passage we just read, we heard that John the Baptist points Andrew, and then Andrew pointed Simon, or Simon Peter, or Peter, his names kind of flick between all of them, to Jesus. For both of them, though, it wasn't when they were pointed towards Jesus, or pointed in Jesus' direction, but when they encountered Jesus, that they became his disciples, and their lives were in some way changed forever. Encountering Jesus, meeting Jesus, seeing Jesus, hearing Jesus, walking beside Jesus, these are the moments that make and change these first disciples. And what was true 2,000 years ago is also true for us today. Encountering Jesus, meeting Jesus, seeing Jesus, hearing Jesus, and walking alongside Jesus are the moments that change our lives. As I said last week, we feel called to give everyone in Southport multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus. In big ways and in small ways, we want every one of the 100,000 people who walk our streets and live in our communities to have lots of different opportunities to meet with the Jesus who can change their lives. This is our vision, this is our purpose, and this is our prayer. Whoever you are, whether you've been going to church your whole life or whether you've been trying to avoid churches your whole life, we want to give you multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus. What people do with these opportunities, well, that's up to them. But we want to continue giving them to everyone in this town. And we believe that's what God is calling us to do. And so this vision is going to shape what we do and who we are and why we exist. Now, for some of you, the question that might be running through your head is, how are we going to do this? And that is what we're going to be chatting about today. But before I approach the how question, we're just going to take a step back and we're going to think about the town we live in and where people in this town are on their spiritual journey. I think everyone is on a spiritual journey. Our spiritual journey doesn't begin just when we become a Christian. It begins from the day we are born. And this journey can be represented maybe by a line as you see on the screen. At one end of the line would maybe be someone like Mother Teresa, or pick your favourite good Jesus-y person. And at the other end of the line would probably be like a Man City fan. Actually, that's a joke because they don't even make the line. Don't even come close to the line. You might be able to guess what football team I support. At some point on this journey, people commit themselves to following Jesus and people become a follower. For some people, this might be kind of a big moment where they can remember an exact date. For others, this might be something that just evolves and one day they think to themselves, actually now I follow Jesus. But the journey doesn't end when people become Christians. And people can move up and down this journey. I'm sure we can all probably think of someone who at one point was committed to following Jesus and now thinks it's all just a load of rubbish. And we can probably also all think of someone who thought it was all a load of rubbish and are now committed to following Jesus. All our journeys, they're not straight lines where we slowly but surely become more and more perfect versions of ourselves until on our deathbeds we're the most complete, mature and well-rounded person we will ever be. Instead, all our journeys are full of lots of squiggles. I love using the word squiggles. I mean, I've never used it in a preach, but I'm going to use it more. But anyway, all of our journeys, I got distracted there. Keep those thoughts inside, Ben. Instead, all our journeys are full of squiggles. They're full of ups and downs. They're full of steps backwards and forwards. We can put maybe some words where people might find themselves on the journey with Jesus. So maybe the cynic is someone who thinks Christianity is false. They don't believe it. They might not be particularly interested in it. They might be able to talk about God as kind of an intellectual conversation in which God is spoken of as a concept, but not maybe someone who can be known. They may have been closer to Jesus in some parts of their life, but also they may have had just no contact with church or Christianity. A skeptic is someone who is in some way open to the idea of God, but for whatever reason, they aren't exploring it. Maybe they've just never really thought about God. Maybe they just don't really know if God exists or not. Perhaps they used to be closer to God in some parts of their life, but now maybe life's just got in the way and they're just all a bit unsure about everything. Maybe they used to be a cynic and they maybe had some experience with God that made them question their certainty that there was no God ever. These people are not firmly against the idea of God. They're just maybe not looking for him. A spectator is someone who's on the edge. They watch from the sidelines, but they haven't quite made up their mind if they want to get involved or not. For some, maybe this is all just very, very new, and they're not sure they really understand Jesus and what this whole church thing and Christianity thing is all about. For others, maybe they've been further down the line in their past, but something, or maybe life has just got really busy and has meant that they're now just sitting on the sidelines watching. A seeker is maybe someone who's actively looking for Jesus. They want to find out more. They want to experience more, but they still haven't made up their mind if they can trust Jesus and whether they want to commit to following him. A believer is someone who has in some way knowingly, or maybe even unknowingly, committed themselves to following Jesus. As I said before, for some people this can be a specific moment, and for others they might drift into it. Just like if you're driving into Wales, at some point you see the sign and you know, I've entered Wales, and at other points you're not really paying attention and you find yourself in Wales and like, oh, I'm in Wales. That's what sometimes happens with some people. And finally, a disciple is someone who hasn't just committed themselves to following Jesus, but is also doing it. They're growing and they're maturing. They're pursuing Jesus as well as they're being pursued by Jesus. Now, these labels aren't as neat in real life, but I wonder what label you would give yourself. Sitting here today, where do you see yourself fitting along that line? And maybe if you think back to other periods in your life, where would you be on this line? What labels might you give to yourself in other periods of your life? For every person, their journey towards and away from Jesus is this lifelong push and pull. For many, a journey from a cynic to a disciple is not done over weeks or months, but over years. Yes, some people have these big dramatic moments and they become Christians overnight, like Paul on the road to Damascus, but that isn't the norm. In this day and age, when people's walls are high and people's lives are busy, it's often a long process from moving from cynic to disciple. Now, historically, some parts of the church have focused on the moment of conversion as the finish line. All that matters is that we just need to save everyone from going to hell. We just need to get as many people as possible past the finish line. That is our purpose as a church. That has, at times, led to harmful pressuring and rushing people along their journey, and the abandonment of people when they become Christians. In the long term, I think this has led to some people moving further away from Jesus rather than closer to Jesus. Well-intentioned Christians who think they are saving the lost are sometimes the reason people move away from Jesus, not towards Jesus. Research from the secular world has shown that one negative experience outweighs 5 positive experiences. And I think sometimes some churches and Christians are very well intentioned, but are giving people negative experiences of Christianity that take multiple positive experiences to undo. Now, we as a church want to focus our attention on giving people multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus, wherever you are along your spiritual journey. We want to focus on helping people do that at their own pace, in their own way, without pressure or expectations placed upon them, in a way that makes people feel safe, and for all people to have positive experiences of church and Christians. Our aim is not simply to convert people. Our aim is to be like John the Baptist or Andrew and point people towards Jesus. A cynic becoming a skeptic is just as much of a joy as someone becoming a believer. A believer becoming a disciple, everyone along their spiritual walk. Now, I want you to think about Southport. Think about the town, maybe not the closed pier and all the things you don't like, but think about Southport as a whole and the people that are living in our town. And the question is, where would you say most people fitted? I think you've already been given a hint where I would say. But where would you say most people fitted inside our town on their kind of journey with Jesus? My guess would be, and this would only be a guess, that the majority of people that live in Southport are cynics, skeptics, and possibly verging into spectators. I think if we're being generous, there are probably around 3 to 5% of people in this town who regularly go to a church. There'll be some people in this town who are Christians that don't attend a church, and there's going to be a few seekers hanging around. And there's going to be lots of cultural Christians, particularly in older generations. But I would say that in the majority of this town, this is where people would put themselves if they had to put themselves on a line. And for each place a person finds themselves on their spiritual journey, they're generally asking different questions, and they need Christians to help them and support them in different ways. For the cynic, the skeptic, and verging into the spectator, their question I think they're mostly asking is, well, what's in it for me? Why would I bother with this Christian thing? You know, it sounds like hard work, early mornings on a Sunday. I'm not the greatest fan of that. It sounds a little bit restrictive. It sounds a little bit outdated. What do I get out of it? How do we help point these people to Jesus? And how do we help them to trust Christians and stir up questions in them? I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves when thinking about cynics, skeptics, and spectators. Now, before we get to the answer, I'm going to tell you a little story. A couple of years ago, my children, I've got 2 children, they're now 7 and 9, but my children are called Annabelle and Florence, and they wanted to know what was for lunch. They were asking, Dad, what's for lunch today? And I said, we've got soup. We've got soup today. Florence doesn't really like soup, but anyway, I said we've got soup. So they asked, what kind of soup is it? Maybe Florence might like this type of soup. If it's made of chocolate, she would. Any other, maybe not. And for whatever reason, with a very serious face, I turned to them and I said, today is tadpole soup. Yes, I did. So they look at me a little bit strange, and they are not really sure whether they believe me or not. And I'm not always sure that my children trust the answers that I give them, because sometimes I just think it's amusing to make things up. I don't know, that's something that I'll deal with a therapist one day. But I insisted that we put tadpoles in our soup, and that's what gave it, the slightly crunchy, salty flavour you taste every time we have soup. Well, that's the tadpoles in it. Anyway, they're not convinced, so I start saying, well, let's go to the font of all knowledge in our house, let's go to YouTube. That's where we get all our information from. So I start typing into YouTube, tadpole soup, and at this point I think, I'm about to get rumbled, this can't really go on any further. However, to my surprise, there are lots of videos on YouTube about tadpole soup. Yes, that was my thought. So after getting over my surprise and my slight internal revulsion to people eating tadpoles in soup, I told them, see, I told you, tadpole soup's a thing. Now at this point, they start to question themselves. They start to question all reality. They have a kind of an existential crisis going on, and they're not really sure if they want to eat the soup anymore. Even to this day, they don't always trust the things that I come out with. Trust is a disappearing commodity in our world. People naturally distrust others, and they distrust things that are unknown. People worry that everything has an angle or that everything is a scam. People don't always agree on what is true or even what the word truth means. We see this played out in elections, in pandemics, on social media, and in people's thoughts about organised religion. Most people are wary of Christians and the church. Now, this is for lots and lots of reasons. Lots of people don't have much experience with Christians and the church, and maybe it's all just a little bit unknown. Unfortunately, the reputation we have, particularly in the media, isn't always the best. If people have experiences or encounters with Christians, they're not always the most helpful. And lots of people just don't really know us and therefore don't really trust us. In the passage today, Andrew and Simon Peter encounter Jesus because they trusted the person pointing them to him. Andrew was John's disciple and trusted what John said. Look, the Lamb of God. Jesus was the promised Messiah. If Andrew was unsure about John, or maybe Andrew didn't know John, or didn't trust John, he wouldn't have walked up to Jesus and asked if he could spend the whole day with him. If Andrew didn't trust John, he would not have encountered Jesus. Andrew then finds his brother, Simon Peter, and says to him, "We found the Messiah." If Simon Peter thinks Andrew is a little bit like me with the tadpoles and the soup, he might want to fob Andrew off. He might have his walls up. He might be cynical or skeptical. But Simon Peter encounters Jesus because he trusted what Andrew said. The reason that both Andrew and Simon Peter encountered Jesus is because they trust the person pointing them to him. They know the person pointing them to him, and they feel safe. Trust is earned, trust takes time, and trust comes through being known. If we want everyone to encounter, or everyone in Southport to have multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus, then a lot of our effort as individuals and as a whole church has got to be earning people's trust, knowing people, becoming friends with people, and spending time with people. It is through trusting Christians that people might begin asking questions. People might begin moving along their journey. People might begin opening up to the possibility of encountering Jesus. Pushing people to encounter Jesus without trust will not work in today's world. Most people's walls are far too high, and they will only drop them if they trust us, if they trust you. For cynics, skeptics, and spectators, we help them along their journey by building trust, building friendships, and stirring questions, not giving answers. For the spectator and the seeker, their question is, who is Jesus? For many people, Christianity is just very, very new, and many people haven't grown up in church. How we help these people move along their journey is to give them an understanding of who Jesus is. This isn't just knowledge, but also an emotional and spiritual understanding. For the seeker and maybe the early believer, the question is, can I trust Jesus? In the Gospels, lots and lots of people encounter Jesus, but only a few people trust Jesus. We support these people by telling, showing, and encouraging them that Jesus is trustworthy. And finally, the question is, will I live for Jesus? Will I give my life to him? Will I trust him in every moment? Will I follow his path for me? We help these people by supporting them as they grow. You know, living for Jesus is not a solo journey. It's a journey you undertake with others. We are their others. You are my others. I am your others. We live for Jesus together. In real life, a person's journey is not as neat as this and these labels I've suggested. People may be asking different questions and they may need different help along their journeys in different ways. But as broad brushstrokes, this is the context that Christ Church finds itself in. If we feel called to give everyone in Southport multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus, this context feeds the big question, how do we do it? And the way Christ Church is going to do it is through these three headings: befriending, introducing, and growing. These 3 headings will help structure our church, whoever you are on your spiritual journey. It helps people find a place they can call home, whoever they are and however close or far they are from Jesus. It helps to enable all people to be pointed towards Jesus and have, over the long term, multiple opportunities to encounter him. The first heading is befriending. I'm a believer that all of life is about relationships. A relationship with God and relationships with others. It's from and within relationships that trust is nurtured, love is found, acceptance is discovered, healing takes place, and relationships are the most fruitful and natural place Jesus can be pointed from. Andrew and Simon both came to encounter Jesus because a friend or a family member pointed them to him. That isn't to say that friendships are contrived, forced, or simply fake in order to earn people's trust and move them along their spiritual journey. But it is to say that we as Christians want all our friends to have opportunities to encounter the Jesus we have found, at their own pace and in their own way. If we care deeply about our friends, our family, our work colleagues, our neighbours, we will want them to have opportunities to encounter Jesus, in the big ways and in the small ways. And there are 2 ways we're going to think about befriending people at Christ Church. The first is social spaces. For many people, coming to church is just a little bit too much, particularly sitting through an extra long sermon on a Sunday. For some people, an alpha course might be too much. They're just not at that point in their life yet. But there are lots of groups and activities or spaces we can create where the focus is on friendship and mixing people who know Jesus and people who don't know Jesus together. The reality is that in many churches there are Christians who spend all their time mixing with only Christians. And in our town, many people who would say they have no faith spend all their time mixing people with other people who say they have no faith. Social spaces are places where everyone can mix together, get to know each other, become friends, and begin living life together. The aim is not to preach at people. The aim is to form friendships, build trust, stir questions, create community, and begin walking with others who maybe wouldn't come through our doors. In another church I was part of what I would describe as the worst Christian football team that has ever existed. Actually, the worst football team, because I think Christian football teams already rank pretty low down on the football team list. We played in the South Manchester and Cheshire Christian Football League. The league makes it sound far more tame than the games actually were. Very choice language, lots of interesting tackles. It was started by about 5 or 6 people from church, and they kind of all invited their friends to come along to play football, and then all their friends invited their friends to come along and play football. And eventually it was a bunch of about 30 of us who played every week. We trained together, we played matches together every week, and we got to know each other. For many of them, they just wanted to play some pretty ropey football, which was fine. But for some, over months and years, we went for beers, we chatted life, we invited them to Alpha, we went through some highs together and we went through some lows together. But it was a space where people could feel accepted, where friendships could form, where trust was built, and where journeys began. In this church, we already have some things that might be described as social spaces. I think Tuesday at 2 and midweek music are good examples of spaces where friendships can form. One of the ways we give everyone in Southport multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus is by creating lots of different social spaces. Some will meet in this building, others will meet elsewhere. Many will be around a particular activity or interest or hobby or group. For me, I think it's easier to invite someone to play football on a Thursday night than it is to persuade them to come to a church service with an extra long sermon. But both can be ways that people advance along their spiritual journey. So the first way we're going to think about befriending is by creating places where people on different stages of their journey can mix. And we just pray that God will work through those friendships. The second way we're going to think about befriending is through helping everyone at Christ Church understand they are missionaries. You are missionaries. Missionaries are not just found in some far corners of the world. We are all missionaries. We are all called by Jesus to take him everywhere we go. To be a little bit of Jesus in our workplaces, schools, friendships, and neighbourhoods. If we want everyone in Southport to have multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus, that involves you. Together, you will always have a bigger network than this church. You will be in places Christ Church cannot go, and you will know people Christ Church doesn't know. That will always be the case. And rather than splitting your faith from your day-to-day life, we need you to see your faith as intertwined with your day-to-day life. The people you know are part of your mission field given to you by God. Now, for some of you, you might be sitting here thinking, well, that sounds a little bit scary. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to chat about this a little bit more. But to be a missionary, you don't need to know good arguments or even be a perfect person. Instead, I think it boils down to 4 simple things. Firstly, can you pray for your friends and the people you know? Can you pray for them consistently, not just once every so often? Can you pray that they would have opportunities to encounter Jesus? Secondly, can you be a good friend? I wonder what you think the characteristics are of a good friend. Maybe think about them for a second. Can you be that for the people you know? Can you spend time with them? Even if it means coming to less church stuff. You have my permission to come to less church stuff. Can you be a bit of Jesus to them so that they can encounter Jesus through you? The third thing, when an opportunity to talk about faith, life, spirituality, meaning, or purpose, or any kind of those deeper questions arise, and trust me, if you're praying for your friends, they will arise, can you listen well and ask questions rather than launching immediately into a 3-minute preach? Call me old-fashioned, but you don't need to be Jesus' salesperson, and you don't need to be his marketing manager. And lastly, when the opportunity arises, can you share some of your story? I think the most powerful thing we have is our own story and our own experiences. People don't encounter Jesus by losing arguments. So tell your story and let Jesus use that. And for me, that is it. Nothing complicated, nothing you have to psych yourself up in the morning in front of a mirror about. Pray for them consistently. Be a good friend. And when the opportunity arises, listen well and share some of your story. If everyone in this church could be a missionary, lots of people in this town would get multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus. So the 2 areas of the church we're going to focus on in terms of befriending are social spaces and everyone being a missionary. The next heading we're going to be looking at is introducing. For some people, they might come to something like Tuesday at 2 for the rest of their lives, and they might want nothing more. That's okay. We go at their pace. But for others, after maybe some prayer, after getting to know that not all Christians are weird, some of us are, not all of them are weird. After sharing maybe some stories, they might want to know a little bit more. For Christ Church, this is where Alpha comes in. Some of you will know what Alpha is. Some of you will have been on Alpha. Alpha is a 10-week course that explores life, faith, and meaning. People don't have to agree with everything that's said on Alpha. People can say what they think. But Alpha creates this community that journeys together. Now, this church has done Alpha for lots and lots of years, and we will continue to use Alpha as the place where we can introduce people to Jesus. We want to see more and more people in Southport encounter Jesus through Alpha. So we have befriending and we have introducing. After befriending and introducing, we have growing. Our vision is not to help lots and lots of people become Christians and then think, you know what, our job is done, we've done well, let's just sit around and drink tea together. We want everyone in Southport to encounter Jesus and to keep encountering Jesus. I need to regularly encounter Jesus in my life to sustain and to grow my faith. And there are 3 ways we're going to do this at Christ Church. The first is called worshipping communities. This is another name we're going to use for our services. They are pretty much what they say on the tin. They are places for people to come together in community and worship Jesus. From the early church until now, this is what it's meant to be church. We are a community that gathers around and worships the resurrected Jesus Christ. Now, we'll probably use the word services for our 9:15 and 11 o'clock, but we're changing the word to worshipping communities because the word services is quite loaded and has certain expectations attached to it. And as we launch new worshipping communities, we want them to be free to be different, to maybe meet outside this building in other places, to target particular groups of people, to be creative in how they help people encounter Jesus. The second way we're going to think about growing is through small groups. This church has an interesting history with small groups, and I use that in the most British sense of the word, interesting. Small groups can be amazing communities where people can find a home, where people can be supported, where people can be vulnerable, and where faith can come alive. We want all our small groups to be communities like that, where people can immediately find a little family who will walk with them and point them to Jesus. And to do this, next year, we're going to be resetting all of our small groups, and you're going to hear more about that early next year. Finally, we want to be a church that grows and develops leaders. Leaders are not just those people that stand at the front and deliver really long sermons. Leaders are found in all areas of church life. Some are in big roles and some are in small roles, but they all serve the church in different ways. We want to be a church that grows leaders. Leaders who love Jesus, leaders who walk with Jesus, who point to Jesus, and leaders who lead like Jesus. For us to grow and to fulfill even part of our vision, we need more Jesus-shaped leaders. So the 3 words that define how we're going to give everyone in Southport multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus are befriending, introducing, and growing. But through all of this, we have to be a church that prays, a church that values prayer, a church that trusts God. Nothing happens without prayer. This vision is dead without prayer. This strategy, it only looks good on paper without prayer. God is the one who breathes life into our hopes and dreams, into our ideas and plans, into our friendships and into our town. We want to be a church that prays, where prayer isn't just this If we overlay all these elements onto the spiritual journey we looked at earlier, it might look something like this. We want to give everyone in Southport a space where they feel like they can belong. We want to give them a space where they feel like they can meet people and find community. We want to give them a space where they have an opportunity to encounter Jesus. And this way of structuring church isn't a funnel, and it isn't a really rigid system where if you don't know all 66 books of the Bible, you have to join a social space or alpha because otherwise you haven't passed the test to join anything a little bit deeper. In a previous church I was part of, we had significant numbers of not yet Christians coming in through small groups. It was there that they found community, and it was there that they explored faith. People can come and go wherever they want. For some people, small groups will be the best entry point into church and into faith. Jesus wants to encounter people. Jesus wants to change our town. Jesus wants the church to help rather than hinder people's spiritual journeys. And for Christ Church, the way we're going to give everyone multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus is through befriending, introducing, and growing. That's a very good run around. I know, it's been long. I do apologise. We're nearly there. We've nearly landed. So, where do we hope we're going to be in 3 years' time? So, at the beginning of 2028, what do we hope that God has done through us as a church? And we have 5 targets of where we hope we'll be at the start of 2028, based on our vision and what we have spoken about today. We want to see 1,000 people in different social spaces. People finding friendship and maybe beginning their first tentative steps towards Jesus. We want to see 200 young people in some way connected to this church. We want to see this church be a place where young people thrive and where young people can encounter Jesus. We want to see 100 first-time Alpha explorers, 100 people being introduced to Jesus and given space to ask questions and find community. We want to have 20 reset small groups. Little families where people feel loved, can be open, and can find other Jesus followers. And we want to have one new worshipping community. A new community that is centred on Jesus, but maybe looks a bit different to our current 9:15 and 11 o'clocks. These are our targets over the next 3 years. And in reality, some of them are going to be tough. All of them will need God. All of them will need you, the people of Christ Church, to bring them to life. If I'm honest, this sounds quite exciting, but it also sounds a little bit daunting. There are lots of things that could go wrong. The targets make me wonder if I'm going to have to stand up in 3 years and make all sorts of excuses. The vision to give everyone in Southport multiple opportunities to encounter Jesus. On some days, I wish this was a little bit smaller. Maybe give 100 people opportunities to encounter Jesus. Maybe 500 if I'm feeling quite bullish on a positive day. But everyone, that's quite a lot of people. Simon Peter, in the passage today, met Jesus through his brother. Sometime later on his journey, there was this moment where he was in a boat with the wind and the waves crashing around him and Jesus telling him to walk on water. He could have focused on what could go wrong, but instead he looked towards Jesus and he took a step into the unknown. We and I could focus on what could go wrong. We can think, you know what, this is all too big, this is a little bit scary, we can just stay in the boat and we can be happy together. Or we can fix our eyes upon Jesus and take a step into the unknown. In the end, there's no guarantees if we will sink or if we will walk on water. But whatever the outcome, We want to be a church that always tries to follow Jesus, because in the end, that's all that really matters. As our friend John Ortberg said, if you want to walk on water, then you've got to get out of the boat. Let me pray.
God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship so alive, I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises so alive. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature so alive, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you so alive, so if the stars were made to worship so alive, through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. And as you speak, 100 billion failures disappear. Where you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've done. Every part designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I. I can see your heart a billion different ways. Every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I. Like you would again 100 billion times. But what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
Wonderful. I hope you've continued to sense God speak to you through our second episode of the series. If you'd like to journey deeper into this week's message and allow it to shape and grow your faith even more so, we've got some questions for reflection, which you can find in the description or the comments. They would be good in your own private reflections or for reflecting together with others, supporting and challenging one another. Do get in touch also if anything has spoken to you in this episode. You can do that either through the CCS office or even the YouTube comments if you feel comfortable with that. And if you want to stay connected, there's loads of ways to get involved in what's happening amongst the CCS family. If you'd like to connect with one of our missional communities, blessing the Southport community, again, just contact the office if so, or if you just want to keep in the loop, you can sign up to our weekly email or check out this week's CCS news in the episode description or on our social media channels. In fact, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to make sure you never miss an episode of CCS Online. And give the like button a bit of a click as well, so YouTube knows our episodes are worth sharing with others. We pray that you have a blessed week and look forward to joining with you again.